Hey there, hunting family. Get ready for an episode like no other. We got a seasoned outdoorsman and DIY enthusiast, Lon Mentzer, joining us today. We're going to be diving into the world of harvesting, butchering, and bringing that bounty right to your table. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, Lon's got tips, insights, and stories to share. Stay tuned as we explore the benefits, hurdles, and sustainable practices in this exciting journey from field to table. Buckle up, you're not going to want to miss it. So, all right, guys, welcome back, hunting family. We're going to do another episode of Tracks and Tackle. We got the round table here today. We got myself, we got Hollywood Horse, we got Lon Mentzer and Buck Mentzer's back with us for another episode. And today we're going to be talking about field to harvest. You know, one of the things that we've done ever since I got started was we butchered our own deer, we butchered our own hogs, we've done it ourselves. I can't ever remember sending a deer off to the butcher to be processed, and it's a skill set, but learned a lot of it from my brother here, and so we're going to bring him on and talk through some of the wisdom that he might have. He got a couple of white hairs at this point, and I think you can lend us a little bit of wisdom when it comes to this subject.
We'll try.
Yeah, so I know you've been on the show before, but why don't you just tell everybody who you are, and then we can get into it.
Just a white-haired guy, goes to work every morning, loves to be in the outdoors.
All right.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
Sounds like a great guy to get along with. But yeah, growing up, I guess the attitude is this is the way that we've done it, this is the way that we've always done it, and this is the way that we're going to do it, kind of thing of just taking in knowledge. You learn a lot by just sitting and listening to people, but so butchering was something that was instilled to me, whether it was a pig, hog, deer. If we shot it, we took care of ourselves. We didn't send it off, as you touched on there, Arrow. But why don't you touch in a little bit here, Lon, as to growing up, how you got into butchering and taking care of your animals yourself?
It was what we did. You know, from the time I was a little guy, 4 or 5 years old, you know, that was part of the process. You want stuff in the freezer, you want stuff on the shelf, you took care of it. You know, you planted the garden, you went hunting, the family got together and whacked hogs and chickens and beef, because, you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, you know, it wasn't like we were going to the grocery store to buy it, you know.
So that was part of our upbringing. You know, we all started doing it together, and we did it as a family, but there was also a coming together as a community too. You know, because of the people that you do it with, everybody played a part, and you helped one another out and that sort of stuff. And you know, we're real big on camaraderie. And the stories we tell and that sort of stuff. But you've been doing it a lot longer than us. I mean, you taught us how to do some of this stuff, and you know, so from a camaraderie piece, you like the coming together of different families. To when it comes to butchering hogs, you know, what was that experience for you before we were around? You know, when you were younger, how did they get you involved and get you into it? Because I know we had to, certainly we weren't able to do the things that you have us do now when we were younger.
It was awesome, you know, because I got to miss a day of school.
They did it during the week back then.
Well, the entire family would get together and kill 15, 20 hogs. And I'm talking the entire family and neighbors that were like family. Extended
family and everybody.
You know, and it was a day of it.
I can't ever remember doing
This was before your time.
More than 4 hogs. You know,
Yeah.
doing 2 hogs now in a weekend is tough.
But, you know, back then, you know, you cut the hindquarters off of it, Guy took it and started salting it and, you know, make it into a cured ham. You know, you cut them in big chunks, you know, for the bacon and the pork chops, and, you know, just did it. And there was always something for some kid to do that was willing to work. You know, so I thought it was awesome. It was a vacation day. I didn't have to go to school. You know.
Anything to
And
get off
that's
the
how,
school.
basically, you know, I was introduced to it, you know. I was told, tomorrow you're not going to school. I was like, why?
You're going to work.
You know, carrying buckets and getting this and getting that, you know. But we're going to give a knife to a 5 or 6 year old.
How big was the butcher shop you were doing 15 in a day?
It was outside.
There was no butcher shop.
There was no
right?
butcher shop. It was outside, you know, wood fires under black kettles like we do it in today, you know, were built in the driveway. You know, there was a table there that once the guys shot him and scalded them, you know, they got cut in half and then they got flipped on tables, and guys and wives and daughters and sons, you know, started working on stuff. And, yeah, till it was all said and done.
So
You know, it was a day.
take us through the process of, you know, I know that technology's helped us, you know, change the way that we do it now. And don't be afraid to get up into that microphone so that we can hear you. Why don't you take us through the process of, you know, how that is? Because it sounds like we had different people. When you have that many people working together for their stations, right?
There was 30, 40 people involved when I was in elementary school. You know, it
That's
was
incredible
a
to
big
think
going
of.
on.
Yeah.
But that's what they did to make sure if they wanted a slab of bacon, you know, in June or July,
Everybody helped out.
you know, they had a slab of bacon they could have for breakfast or on a burger or whatever, you know, and they just picked a date and that's when they did it.
So we've done a lot of like deer venison, like we cut all that stuff up ourselves, and we grew up, you know, butchering together. I don't know how many. I mean, you guys have done hogs too.
Yeah, we do our own hogs ourselves too, and so you were saying, Lon, about salt curing the hams. Did you guys do your own bacons and stuff all back then?
Back then, they
You guys
did.
did. Cool.
They did it
Cool.
all.
Like, so I started doing my bacons again myself. I've done a couple hams myself, and like everyone, they all, the guy, you know, the group I'm butchering with now, they're looking at me going, "Why do you do that? Just drop them off the butcher shop."
Yeah.
Which sometimes I do.
Sometimes it's
Yeah,
easier to have
yeah.
someone else do it.
I
It's
do,
more
I
work.
do, I do my own bacons all the time because I got a recipe that works really good.
Uh-huh.
I don't always do hams because it's not that my ham recipe isn't good. It's just that I don't always have space for it. You know,
Space and time.
Space and
It takes
time.
time.
The bacons are pretty easy, and I got, like I say, I got a good recipe.
Mhm.
Everybody likes the bacon, so I do my own bacon. But
So,
that's cool to hear that, like, then you were doing it all yourselves. You weren't dropping it off somewhere to
Nope.
get them cured and
So like,
interesting.
yeah, so like we do a, you know, last couple times this year, you've got some video and you're posting like some shorts on YouTube and things, and we got like a whole comment section going on, you know, because not everybody in this day and age understand scrapple. What is it?
That's a great debate too. Like, you could start a whole debate on what scrapple is, because scrapple
Right.
to one group and scrapple to another group is different.
Completely different.
And it's
one group
regional
is
too,
talking
though.
about and one group's talking puddings, one group's talking scrapple
Mush.
and mush, you know, and then you start like really sitting down at a table and talking, and it's like, wait a minute, we're all talking about the same thing here. Are you sure?
Yeah.
You know,
I know, like there's a lot of people out there, like, because we're from the central Pennsylvania area, heavily German influenced, and you know, so we don't want to see any part of the animal not used. And I get it, like back in the day, that was because there wasn't an abundance. We don't have that issue right now in our country. Like, there's always been an abundance my entire life, but we were just brought up. Everything went into the kettle. You know, we're gonna get as much out of this thing as we possibly can.
yeah, for me it was interesting because all I've heard of was scrapple to here. You know, there's these other words I
Pawn
haven't heard of.
Hoss is another one. You know.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, with where I work and the company I work for, different guys, you know, just working over the mountain from home in Shippensburg, there's a whole different lingo of what they call it. Like, and I bring our scrapple in,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, that's not scrapple, that's pawn hoss," or that's one guy says that's puddings.
It's like soda versus pop.
Yeah, yeah. It's just crazy to hear the different variations of what, you know, what one group calls it as opposed to this. You know,
It's good. It's good though. I mean, I had some for breakfast this morning.
yeah, yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
I think it's interesting you touched on making your own bacon, but like for me growing up with this crew, like it's nothing we touched. Like I can remember, you know, we're trying to get as much meat off of, you know, the ribs as we can, but just cutting through all them fat layers. I'm like, there's nothing here. So I don't know if is there like a special machine you use that kind of cuts it off? Do you hand cut it?
Yep, hand cut. I hand cut my own, and that was all kind of from Lon touched on earlier. Been watching it since I was old enough to remember, and nobody ever really officially sat down and said, "This is what you do. This is how you do it."
You learn by watching.
You just watch the guy that everyone trusts to do it right, and you know, you tweak on it a little bit. You learn from this guy, you learn from that guy, but you know, there was always that one main guy that everyone trusted to cut their main parts of their pig out, their hindquarters, to get the hams out of it, get the bacons off of it, cut your roast, cut your loins out.
It's like the captain.
Yeah, he cut the main chunks. So after watching him over the years, now when we do, I'm the guy that cuts them chunks.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Promotion.
yeah. I guess it's a promotion.
It's time for you two to get promoted.
Yeah. I guess with that promotion though, and at least with the group I do it with, they're always telling you work faster because it takes time to chunk it out. To
Precision work is you can't rush it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's an art to it, but you got to know what you're doing a little bit because, you know, if you want good roast, if you want good chops, you got to know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And you got to know the difference between what's chops and what's roast, or you're cutting some chops out that you're like, man, these chops weren't that good. They weren't this good because you took a little too many off of there. You should have turned that into a pork roast or turned that into sausage, you know, depending. And there again, you're going into how big was our hog? What was the weight of the animal we were working with? You know.
Yeah. So for those people listening and stuff, like, why don't you guys touch on, you know, the size of the animal and how that factors into flavor, taste, what you want to get out of it. You know, I know we do like a lot of sausage, but then, you know, some hogs you want chops out of.
Well, a lot of that's personal preference even. I mean, what one person says is the right size, the next guy's going to say no. Personally, if I want bacons, hams, and sausage, or bacons, hams, and chops, I should say, a 300-pound animal is where I want to be. If I'm just making sausage, I don't care what it weighs, you know.
It can be several hundred pounds.
It can be several hundred
to do sausage.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's what?
Your big old sows.
180 till a pig becomes a hog?
Something like that, yeah.
150, 180, something like that. And it's like every other thing, you know. The younger it is, the more tender it is.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's the key.
It's like a 3-year-old doe ain't going to taste as good as, you know, a 1.5-year doe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And a 3-year-old buck is going to taste more gamier and wild than that 3-year-old doe does. You know?
Yeah. And if you talk to the guys growing them, talk to the farmers
Yep.
growing pigs day in, day out, they will tell you from their side of it, 320 pounds, that's about where they would stop taking chops, bacons, you know, hams out of it, because a pig's mentality changes about that. There's a whole change in a pig at that level. Again.
Yeah, the anatomy in itself
Yes,
and everything.
the anatomy in
is
itself, how it acts, how it, you know, how it eats, you know, in the barn and with the other animals
Yeah.
changes. So,
How would you say? Let me throw this, Lon. What are some of the benefits? I know that you said we've always done it, but what are like the key benefits of taking the do-it-yourself approach to butchering? Whether it's venison or farm animals.
My thing on that is we're organic, before organic was cool,
Right.
Because we buy the hogs, we hunt the animals,
Mm-hmm.
all right, and the chickens and the beef and all that, and they're not given the growth hormones, that they weigh a certain amount, by the time they're 6 months or 9 months. And then processing it yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you can, if you're not going to eat it raw, if you're starving to death, you throw that piece out, so you're getting pure, God-grown
Right.
critters that ain't juiced up, got stuff in them to save them, so they can be on the shelf for a year and a half and still be politically correct, safe to eat.
I know when we started cutting up deer with these guys, what you had taught me, I remember you still say this to today, like you had said, is if you wouldn't take that piece and feel like comfortable to throw it in a frying pan and eat it, don't save it. Looking at because when you shoot a deer, there's trauma to the point of impact and that sort of stuff, and sometimes that meat it's not going to taste good to begin with. So yeah, that's one of the things I remember you teaching us when we were younger. Like, toss it if you wouldn't feel confident enough to toss it in a frying pan.
Right, and there's a big difference between farm-raised animals and wild game.
Mhm.
When you talk about how that animal processes their food and the fat in the fat in a deer, you don't want the fat on a deer.
Right.
What's the rule? Cut all the white stuff out.
Yeah, cut all the white stuff out.
That's completely different from
and
venison.
completely different.
To
When you start
pork.
on butchering pork, yeah, you get rid of some of it in some cases depending on the weight of your animal, but the fat has the flavor in pork.
Yeah.
Kind of,
Even
so-
in beef, it's different.
Yeah,
than
even,
it is
even
venison.
yeah, even in beef, yeah. I mean, a lot of guys. I know I make my own snack sticks and stuff with venison. I'm mixing pork fat in with my venison
Just to get some fat into
to
it.
get some fat content, to
Fat
get some
and
moisture into the meat. So whole different world depending on the animal.
Yeah, for those people that are listening or watching and have never delved into this world, like, there's a lot of wisdom at the table right now. Because we've
Call it that.
well, you'll call it that, but I mean, we've done this
Yeah.
our entire lives.
I think what is interesting, and we'll start with Lon here and then jump over to Buck, but from my perspective, and I wasn't around when you were doing the 15 hogs in a day, but just the perspective of how you've changed the process of working through that hog, and even whether it's deer as well. I don't know if once you learn the skill, if you change it, you're a little bit more efficient with how you do it. You learn a trick or two how to work through the operation.
The deer and wild game has basically been the same forever until 20, 35 years ago, something like that. If you take the white out of the wild game, you take the silver skin out, and just have a red piece of meat to work with, it tastes 90% better than it does, if you just make chunks out of it, after you harvest it. I got 3 ladies in my life that we eat deer meat at my house and not anywhere else because they were raised on it. But it had the white, which was the tallow, and the fat that's bitter.
Didn't taste
and then
good.
the tallow lets a taste in your mouth. But if you start with just a plain red piece of wild game, there's not a whole lot that's a whole lot better than that. And as far as the hogs, it's gotten a lot easier because there's cure mixes you can buy now. You can buy casings to put your sausage and stuff in. When we were doing them 15 hogs a day, there was 2 or 3 ladies that their job was to get all the crap and stuff out of the intestines, and get them washed out really good because that's what, sausage went in. 40 years ago.
That's part of not wasting a part of the animal. I mean, you utilized everything down to the
Back
intestine tract.
Back
Yeah.
then, there wasn't, blood and maybe a couple bones, but even the bones, they sawed down and they called them soup bones, because that would flavor something later in the year.
Yeah, get the stock.
Yeah, I remember we would have a gentleman with he'd pull his truck and he'd have I don't know, like a trailer on the back, and he'd bring the hogs to Paps in a little pen. We would put them down, and then we would scald them and scrape away,
Yep.
all the hair and then I guess eventually we jumped to skinning. Like what led to that?
Time, people willing to work.
Yeah, not having
Yeah.
30 people to help, have a station of people that were skinning.
Yeah.
I remember scraping hogs.
You put them into boiling water in a trough and scrape the hair off of them. Okay, and then the skins went into the scrapple.
Okay.
Okay, it wasn't used for leather, and that was the only purpose. But back then, when you had 25 to 40 people show up to kill 15 hogs, okay, most of them families were farmers, so they had 6 to 12 kids. You were looking for
Stretched
bulk.
it a little bit more too, right?
If you put the skins into the scrapple, okay, it just made it go a little bit further.
I just remember I was low on the totem pole, so I didn't have to mess with that yet. Wasn't part of
You
my
hadn't got
priority
your
list.
promotion
You
yet.
haven't got a promotion yet.
One
Yeah.
1 foot on one side the trough, 1 foot on the other side the trough. Chains underneath it, lifting it up
Yep,
and
I
turning
remember
it.
watching.
You needed a strong back, a weak mind. All right, and it was dangerous because the water you put in there, 10 seconds ago was
It's the skull.
fast boiling. It's like when you shave, you don't do that with cold water. Everybody uses electric stuff now. But you use hot water to get the cleanest shaves you can get.
Opens the pores.
And it was the same thing with killing
Does.
hogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but about the promotions, there's some jobs that are pretty easy, just as like chopping wood, keeping the fire burning, just cutting meat off the bone, and then as you get promoted, you're taking care of the tenderloins and the hams we talked about, and maybe even mixing the spices. You get the spices off it.
Yeah.
It's a little hotter to get into.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody plays a role, and I think that, depending on the group that you're butchering with, we were talking about butchering deer earlier, telling some deer stories, and, when Buck and I were young, we weren't old enough to hunt, but we were old enough to run the frying pan, So while everybody was doing the work, we were still involved, we were present, we were limited in our capacity of what we could do, but, I mean, we were in it. And so everybody plays a role or has a station, within however your setup is.
Yeah.
I would say, one of the questions we had asked is like the benefits of doing it yourself, but like, what's the flip side of that? Because there's a lot of guys that don't do it yourself, and we know certainly the flavor of the meat, would be an example. But what are hurdles or challenges that we face when we embrace the entire process from field to
Time.
table?
Time.
Yeah.
Time. Time is the single largest hurdle. I mean that's the single largest one. Not much other than time, because it's more cost effective. It's just time. And who has extra time right now?
Right.
Well, there's plenty of things to fill our lives up.
Yeah,
Our
yeah.
days are full
Our
of.
days are full as it is, and it just becomes a time aspect. It's definitely satisfying to take it from an animal on the hoof
Mhm.
to wrapped or shrink, or sealed in the freezer, knowing you did it there. You know what went into it. You know where it came from. Know what went into it. And there it is.
A big thing for me, and this is probably taught more than I just figured it out on my own, but it's your deer when you're cutting it up, versus I take it to the butcher and I get that equal amount of meat coming back. You know, they're processing during deer season. They got a ton of deer coming through there, and there's no guarantee you're going to get the deer that you shot back. So when it goes back to that conversation of the 3-year-old deer versus the 1.5-year-old deer,
That's got something to do with it, and there are butcher shops out there that guarantee you're getting your deer back,
right?
okay? But if you shoot a buck, all right, and immediately start taking care of it,
Mm-hmm.
and in the wild game, that is 95% of what you're gonna taste, how it's cared for,
Right.
okay? So if you get it and start cooling it down, you know, whether you butcher it or take it to the butcher shop or what have you, okay, that thing is going to taste a whole lot better than the guy that shoots it and stays at camp for 4 days, you know, going down around driving to the bars and stuff, you know, look what I got,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then takes it to the butcher shop, you know, and
It's
proper
caring.
field care.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're whacking it in the farmer's barnyard or if it's in the middle of the mountain somewhere, you know, has 98% to do with what the flavor of the meat, you know.
And that's probably an overlooked aspect to, like, you know, field care, whether depending on the
details
animal you're
matter.
talking about, you know. But
Yeah, I know personally I've been on hunts where they got quartered out,
yep,
and that meat definitely was different on a deer from a deer being quartered out and cooled that way, as opposed to hanging there and cooling as a whole deer and cutting it out. And you know, because obviously once you quarter it, it's a little harder to hang it. You know,
Mhm.
it's not impossible, but it creates more of a challenge. A whole deer is definitely easier to just hang and then work off of than quarters. So, you know, that plays into it too.
yeah.
It goes back to the time factor again.
And right. There again, we're right back at time.
So, well, this has been a really cool topic. You know, I know not everybody does field to harvest themselves. I know we're an outdoors show that we always want to talk about. You know, getting outside and appreciating nature and stuff. Not everybody butchers their own pigs, but we grew up doing that. You know, so we lend.
Pigs and chickens, and
Oh, yeah.
that was part of the lifestyle growing up.
That's it. I mean, we didn't waste anything. It was on the farm. We want to use it, and but from, you know, hunting deer and stuff. Like I said, I can't ever remember taking a deer to the butcher to have it processed, because we always just did it ourselves. And it was a really cool concept to have an episode talking about this. But to just, if you guys wanted to summarize the process field to harvest and, you know, in a short sentence to wrap up the show, like, what would you say to the guy that is thinking about doing it, thinking about getting into doing it himself versus take it? Because it is easier to just take it to a butcher. But what would your message be to that listener or that viewer of the benefit of wanting to do this?
Rewarding. Yep. Knowing that you took it from the field to the plate,
Yeah.
you know, field to table.
And it's like Lon was saying earlier, like, we were doing organic before organic was cool.
Yeah.
You know,
And
or it was a fad.
the first try might not always be good, but, you know,
And
I think that's important.
yeah.
don't be intimidated,
Yeah.
you know. It's not that complicated. You know, they come with a blueprint. You know, if you
Right.
look at the muscle groups, you know, it just takes time. And if you mess something up, you know, on the seasoning end, or if you mess something up, you know, learn from it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you're gonna get, I don't know, disliked on the computer, you know, because you put it on there, I made this cut wrong, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
It'll still be meat, you know,
Learn from your mistakes
just
and embrace it. I
pay
think,
attention.
and when it comes to just doing anything new, like, you know, we tried some different projects this year, like tanning deer hide. That's what, like, my big takeaway was, and anybody can do this, you know. And I think it goes the same to what you were saying, Buck. You know, you can do this. It's not that difficult. Give it a try, and it's rewarding.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking we got that short video out on our YouTube page, Mentzer's Outdoors, showing basically our experience and our process with the hog butchering and making the scrapple. But
Yeah.
the fall comes around, we'll have to do one for deer for those that are out there trying to
Deer butcher.
yeah,
Yeah.
do your own. So
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So yeah, I mean, check that out. It's like a 10-minute video, but it just, Hollywood here, he took the time to try to document the steps of processing a hog. And yeah, so if you're interested in that sort of thing, check it out. It's on the YouTube page. Appreciate you guys for sort of hanging out with us this afternoon. It's been a fun morning, afternoon, hanging out, swapping stories. And just like anytime, when we turn the microphones off, the real stories start to really flow. But that's how it is. That's how it is. Appreciate your time. We're going to wrap this up. Appreciate you, Lon, for allowing us to use the studio and lending some expertise on this subject as well.
We're good today, taxes are coming in.
Yeah, well, you know what I told you about tax write-offs.
forget it.
So, all right, thanks for sharing your wealth, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, connect with us on social media. Until next time, stay wild.